Usually I try to drink water before we do these things, but I'm enjoying a Coke Zero today.
I like a good Coke every now and then.
I used to be a hardcore Pepsi drinker when I was younger, up until like 3 years ago. Yeah, and don't they say your taste buds change like every 7 years or something like that?
I thought your allergies changed every 7 years.
That could be too, but I could have swore like you have your taste buds change. But so I at one point had a Coke and it was like the greatest thing I ever tasted. And now I'm like a Coke guy. I can't explain it. But do you ever notice that Coke out of a fountain, like say McDonald's, is always like so much better?
So much better, yes.
So I found out that so Coke has pretty strict, not strict, but their recommendations on how to serve it. And McDonald's like really adheres to those recommendations. So they chill the syrup and they chill the carbonated water before it comes out of the nozzle. And then they also account for ice melting. So they basically like give it a little extra Coke punch so that it tastes good even when your ice melts.
I had no idea you were such a Coke connoisseur.
I mean, I learned it like a week ago, so I don't think I was like withholding information.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Keeping all this stuff secret.
Anyway, cheers.
33, 1, 1, 0. Main event of the evening. Thursday and half past the hour.
It's Tuesday, and you're listening to Murder Unscripted.
What is up, crime crew? Welcome back to Murder Unscripted, episode 58 of the most immersive true crime podcast on the internet today. I'm your host, Ed Hydock, along with my co-host and my bestie, Melissa Spivey.
Oh, hey.
All right, Melissa, new month. I always love new months because we get to introduce a new theme, and I have a feeling that people are going to love this theme because I don't remember even why we picked it. I think we picked it because of the incredible guest that we have coming up. I talked to her today. She's still good to go. She had a little mini family emergency today, but still good to go.
No.
Yep,
Good.
We're all good.
I feel like we picked the best theme ever because this month we are going to be talking about and celebrating some badass babes in a block we're calling Girl Power, which makes me want to pull out my Spice Girl Barbies and play Spice World.
No. Also, no. There's very few things I veto on this show, but that's where I draw a line.
Everything that I say you veto.
Because it's stupid.
Everything.
Well, this block, we are going to be discussing some amazing women that either solved crimes or survived crimes, or on Cold Case Files, we used to call flame keepers, we would call them. They're basically people who kept cases alive and eventually played a role in bringing justice to a loved one. So it could be a flame keeper. It can just be some badass babe who did something awesome to bring a case to justice. So we promise you will not want to miss this month's guest.
Anyone in the true crime world, even not, is going to know her.
I think so too.
You know what? When I was like researching for this whole block in this episode, I realized we've already had the opportunity though to talk to and like talk about, but more importantly, talk to so many incredible women.
Absolutely. Well, our guest this month is the baddest of asses. Baddest
It's
of asses?
true. Yes.
That.
Most bad of the asses.
So until we get to her interview, Melissa, let's kick off the block. What do you got for us?
All right. So it was tough to narrow down to pick a case because there are already so many incredible women in like the true crime realm. I've already mentioned my extreme love of Anne Rule and Catherine Ramsland.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like the goddess of true crime, Her Majesty Anne Rule, and the patron saint of Murder Unscripted, Her Excellence Catherine
The
Ramsland.
trifecta.
Well, no, I've decided to complete the Holy Trinity.
Yes.
I'm adding Colleen M. Fitzpatrick. Now, guys, we got to pick a name. We either go with the godmother of genetic genealogy or the Duchess of DNA. I'm still deciding. Today, I'm going to cover another homicide case that was solved with genetic genealogy by the godmother / Duchess herself, Colleen M. Fitzpatrick. Not to be confused with Colleen Fitzpatrick, the singer, Vitamin C. Remember her? The graduation song?
No.
Oh, you had already graduated by the time that came out.
Was the music made after 1979? Because if so, I don't know it.
Oh, you're so geriatric. Moving on. All right. So before I start, just a couple notes. First of all, just because I'm highlighting Colleen, that does not mean she was the only person who solved this case. The police, the detectives, the forensics techs, the prosecutors, etc., they all put in countless hours, and the case never would have been solved without like everyone working together.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, Colleen is a badass bitch, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. She's changed the world, the criminal justice system, and like science as we know it.
Couldn't agree more.
And just second of all, today's case is very brutal. I'm not going to go into unnecessary description, but we do have some dismemberment happening, so fair warning. And then one last thing, for my sources, I used a ton of articles. I also used a 48 hours episode and a Dateline episode. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I used an episode of Snapped, their spinoff called Sunday Scaries. I didn't watch it on a Sunday. And I'm only bringing that up because the stuff in Snap didn't necessarily line up with everything else. So
it rarely does.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind if you watch it and you're like, this is different than what she said. Watch the other ones.
It's called playing free and loose with the facts.
Oh, yeah. It was just like certain things that I'm like, that's a weird way to put it when that's not exactly what happened.
Yeah, well, it's the magic of television. Whatever works for the story, you know?
So, it is Sunday, November 8th, 1992, and we are in Phoenix, Arizona. It's about 7 p.m., so it's like still kind of light out, but it's November, so it's getting dark. At this point, the temperature has cooled down a bit, dropping from a high of 81 degrees, which was about 4 p.m. that day, to a much more pleasant 71 degrees by like this time of the night. Almost 22-year-old Angela Brosso is in her apartment that she shares with her boyfriend, Joe Krakowicki.
I'm sorry, wait, what?
Joe Krakowicki.
What in the Polish mafia is going on here?
I think I said it right. Joe, I'm sorry if I did not, but I believe it's Joe Krakowicki.
Okay, carry on.
So Angela and Joe are hanging out, and Angela decides to go for a bike ride. And this is like totally normal. Angela rode her bike a lot, and she would ride it along this canal. There were trails along the canal for like walking, biking, rollerblading, because it was the 90s.
Yeah.
And it was like super close to her apartment. And usually she and Joe would go together, but Joe decided to stay behind tonight for like the most wholesome reason ever. He was baking a birthday cake for Angela because her 22nd birthday was the next day.
Oh my God, how sweet.
So I know. So definite like boyfriend points. So Angela's like, okay, you know, like I'm going to go, but like I'll be back. So she heads out on her purple 21 speed Diamondback mountain bike.
Diamondbacks were the shit when I was growing up. Everyone wanted a Diamondback.
I had never heard of it. And I said to my husband, and he's like, oh my God, those are awesome. And I was like, So anyway, Joe is baking away, and soon he realizes that Angela had kind of been gone for a while. Like usually she was gone for about an hour, but we're getting past an hour at this point, and the couple had a weekly TV date. Every Sunday, they would watch In Living Color together when it came on at 8 p.m. So when Angela wasn't back by the time the show started, Joe was worried. And according to sources, Joe went outside and like looked around the area of the apartment complex, and it was located at West Cactus Road and Route 17. And some other sources say that he rode his bike around like looking for her, but still couldn't find her. So then he begins calling around to some of Angie's friends in the area, and he actually even called her mom, Linda, who lived in Pennsylvania, where Angie was originally from.
Okay.
No one had seen or heard from her. So finally, around 11:40 p.m., Joe calls the police, and he's like, my girlfriend's missing. Like, I need help. According to the Patriot News newspaper, the police told Joe that he should call back if she hadn't returned by daybreak. Which I don't love, but So by sunrise the next morning, he's like absolutely beside himself with worry, and now he calls the police again. And this time they're like, yeah, okay, this is weird. Something's wrong. So they began searching the area around the apartment on bikes, and they even brought in a police helicopter. A few hours later, a disturbing discovery was found. A headless body was found in a field just about 50 feet from the bike trail.
Oh my God.
And
it was her, I'm guessing. That's awful.
Well, yes. But this body was not only decapitated, but it also had been violently mutilated.
Jeez.
It was described in some sources that the body was almost like split in two, like cut from chest to the pubic bone,
wow.
And like the stomach and chest had been cut open.
That is horrifying.
It was horrific. And there was another cut that almost kind of made a cross across her chest. And like, if you listen to the court testimony of the detectives, like at the eventual trial, what this monster did is honestly beyond most of the brutal shit we hear. Like, these seasoned investigators were taken aback at just the level of violence.
That's crazy. And you wonder if it's A, something ritualistic, B, somebody who knows what they're doing, like a doctor or a surgeon, or C, some freaking maniac. Like we did a show called The Face of Evil. It was a one season thing for ID, and it was cases like this. We would look for the goriest, most brutal cases, mainly not to shock people, but to show the worst of the worst.
Well, our guy today is the worst of the worst.
Wow.
I mean, even these investigators were like, what the hell are we dealing with here?
It's awful.
So I'm not going to go any further into detail. It's out there if you're curious. We eventually find out that this body is Angela, and we find out that she had been stabbed in the back, and the knife managed to puncture like her lung and aorta. So her body was naked except for her shoes and socks, and there was evidence of sexual assault. They ended up finding her bloody clothing. It was kind of like in a trail leading up to her body, and it was like all ripped and cut, and they would eventually find semen on the clothing.
This is so strange, because if this was like a random sexual assault, who takes the time to completely annihilate someone like that for no reason, you know?
And I'm going to be honest with you, even at the end of this, we don't really have an answer as to why.
I hate
the answer
that.
we have is a cop-out. Just, this is going to make you so angry, this case.
God.
So this is great that they have DNA, but it's 1992, which means like CODIS is, if it's even out there yet, it's super new, and, you know, there's no matches. So the only conclusion that investigators could really make is that they did not believe the murder and the decapitation had occurred where the body was found. And that's pretty much all they could tell right up front. And like, while it would take a few days for formal identification, everyone pretty much knew it was Angela.
They can tell that because if you look around the area, they'll find signs of a disturbance in the brush, or in the, you can see evidence of a struggle at that site. And if that's the sign for investigators, if that doesn't exist, those signs, chances are it happened somewhere else and this was just a dumping ground.
Right, because if there's not like a ton of blood where you find the body, then it couldn't have happened there. And remember, it's the next day at this point from when she disappeared. So it's November 9th. So that means she was found on her 22nd birthday.
God, unbelievable.
Which is like, that just seems to make it even more tragic.
That's awful.
So immediately after the murder, police are thinking that their killer, just like you said, could possibly be a surgeon or like someone in the medical field, because the decapitation had been done very cleanly, which to me is very Jack the Ripper, like, because, you know, they thought he could have been like a doctor or a midwife or something.
I still think it might have been.
Yeah, me too. So authorities also begin wondering if this murder was linked to a dismemberment case that had just happened like a few weeks prior. So Diana Vicari, she was a 19-year-old student at Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona, and she had gone missing. And then on October 24th, 1992, so what's that, like 2 weeks before we find Angela, Diana's severed arms were found in a dumpster in Tucson.
Wow.
And I actually covered Diana's case on an MU Mini back in June, so go check that out for more information. But I think you can see why these two cases could potentially be linked. I mean, it's an almost 2-hour drive between Tucson and Phoenix, But still, to find two young women in such a short amount of time, not that far geographically from each other, that's terrifying.
Yeah, 2 hours, when you're a killer, 2 hours is nothing. There's people that drive 20 hours to cover up a crime.
So it's not that far. And I will say, they eventually come out and say that the cases are not linked. And sadly, actually, as of this recording, despite a conviction that was eventually overturned, Diana's case has never been solved, nor has the rest of her body been found.
Well, then I'm glad you're covering this because, hey, you never know who's listening, and maybe the right person can get a tip that'll help.
Absolutely. So that is available on YouTube with our other minis. So back to this case. In a murder like this, the first person that the authorities want to talk to are the people closest to the victim. So we know that that was Joe, and we will get to that in a minute. But first, I want to tell you about Angela Marie Brosso, who is known affectionately to family and friends as Angie. I love that name. So Angela was born on November 9th, 1970 in Pennsylvania, and she grew up in a small town like right outside Harrisburg. It was specifically the Highland Park neighborhood in Camp Hill in Lower Allen Township. Do you?
Mm-hmm. I dated a girl from there.
So she was born to Frank and Linda Brosso, and she had a younger brother named Steve, and he was only 19 at the time of her murder.
Wow.
And I believe that Frank and Linda were divorced or at least separated because some of the news articles mentioned that they were living separately. So Angela, oh my God, she was beautiful. She had these like big, bright, sparkling blue eyes and these gorgeous blonde curls. She was very much like the all-American girl next door. And so many people talked about how Angela was always smiling and like her smile was so bright that it reached her eyes and lit up her whole face. She was described as effervescent, bouncy, optimistic, and witty, having a great sense of humor, which I think it's such a good way to describe someone because it immediately gave me the impression that she was just like excited for life and just brought that excitement to everything she did.
That always adds an extra layer of sadness to the case because this was somebody that everybody liked.
Very much. I definitely got the vibe that she was just like a good person to have in your corner. And like both of her parents talked about what a good kid she was, with her dad saying, quote, "I couldn't ask for a better daughter. Angela changed the character of the room when she entered it." End quote. Which is beautiful.
It is.
Oh, and she loved animals. She grew up having like bunny rabbits and guinea pigs, and she even thought about being a vet at one point.
I like her even more now.
I know, right? So Angela graduated from Cedar Cliff High School in 1989, and she went on to study at DeVry University in New Jersey. It was at this point, actually, that she met Joe, who we talked about at the beginning. And the two would continue to date even when Angie transferred to DeVry in Los Angeles and Joe to the DeVry location in Phoenix, Arizona. So after they graduated, and Angie graduated with like full honors, by the way, she then moved to Phoenix to be with Joe. And at the time of her death, she was working as a trainer at a company called Syntellect, which at the time was like a leading technology company. And Angie had been brought on to teach clients how to use their systems. So the class she was scheduled to teach the day they found her body was for an automated phone system that the company had created. And I'm just going to like describe it how Dateline described it.
Okay.
It was like the first system where you could call like your bank, type in your account number, and the system would read you your balance.
Mm-hmm. I remember it well. Go back to 1990, whatever, and when I was in high school and you had to check your balance, you couldn't just go on your phone and open up the bank app. You called and it was like, your balance is, and it was like, you were just waiting. It was like $6. Like, fuck!
Oh, that's kind of what my balance is now, but okay. So that was like a huge deal, this system. And Angela had worked so hard to get ready to like teach this class.
Well, based on the personality type that you were describing, I mean, it sounded like she would make a great trainer because that's what you want in a trainer. Somebody who's compassionate, someone patient, and has that sense of humor and can just make learning fun. So it sounded like a perfect fit for her.
100%. And people said that like she brought everything to this job. Like she was 110% in it. So it seems like Angie was just doing really, really well in life. She had this great apartment. She had a lot of great friends. She had Joe. She had this great career that was really taking off. So she was just in a really good place. But we all know that not all that glimmers is gold, which brings us back to our investigation. And the first person that police want to speak to, Angie's boyfriend, Joe.
Of course.
He lives with her. He was the last person to see her. And he was the one to call her in missing. So, like, they go right to him.
Mm-hmm.
But when they talk to him, he's cooperative. His emotions are exactly what you would expect from someone who just lost a loved one, especially in such a horrific and grisly way. And he came across as like a loving and now devastated boyfriend. And I'm not going to keep you in suspense. This isn't a crime TV show. So Joe had nothing to do with Angela's murder. It seems like Joe was pretty happy and in love and thought everything was great. Well, Angela had mentioned to a few people that she wasn't very happy anymore and maybe thinking of considering ending the relationship. Some people said that Joe could be jealous, and apparently Angie's mom wasn't his biggest fan. So she had mentioned to a few people, like, you know, I might have to call this off. And I'm only bringing that up because once the police heard that, they like side-eyed Joe for like a little bit longer.
Everyone reacts differently to trauma and traumatic news.
Yeah.
So it's not as, unless something, you'll see little notes in case files about people's behavior, only if it stands out above the normal, something completely over the top.
Right. And like all of his emotions were on par with what, you know, you quote unquote feel they should be.
Sure.
So, you know, but that made them side-eye him like a little bit more, but he was cleared. And then on the Dateline episode, they throw in another like random suspect, some professor that she had in California.
Eating up TV time.
Yep. So police are baffled about this crime and like who could have done this. And they plead for any witnesses to come forward. They really struggled to believe that like no one saw anything because these paths were super popular with bikers, joggers, rollerbladers, whatever. And they were also wondering if someone had found Angie's bike because that was missing, which to this day has never been found.
But remember, if she wasn't killed there and just dumped there, whoever did it wouldn't be there as long.
Right.
So the chance of them being seen like decreases significantly if they're just there for a hot second to drop a body and leave rather than committing the act in that spot.
I think the whole community was just so shocked because it was such a violent and brazen crime, like in the middle of the city where people generally are.
Yeah.
Not like it was the middle of the night, you know, when she went riding.
Well, yeah, and this is obviously an incredibly brutal scene. So when people read about that in 92, they were hearing it on the news, they were reading it in newspapers. When they hear about how brutalized this person was, the level of fear shoots up. Like there's a monster out there somewhere, and are we next?
Exactly. And I think that was a big thing on everyone's mind because it just seemed so random and just so out of left field.
Yeah.
So police are just baffled. So by November 19th, and this is 10 days after Angela's body was found, the police had nothing. And not for lack of trying. They did everything they could. They'd even reached out to other states who had similar cases, thinking maybe they had a serial killer on their hands. They talked with police in New Jersey, Missouri, California, like all these different states, but nothing could be definitively linked.
Wow. Investigators had a much more difficult job back in the 90s than they do today. Obviously, information travels like lightning now. Back then, not so much.
Right. I mean, there could have been stuff going on like the other side of the country that they had no idea about.
Yep.
But then on November 20th, 1992, which I believe is also the day that her obituary hit the newspapers, there was a man out for a leisurely stroll along the canal. It was about 2 miles south of where Angela's body had been found. And this poor man, there's a whole history with him, this poor guy, he spotted something strange against the grates off the side of the canal. And when he looked closer, it was a head.
Oh my God.
So he calls police. They arrive to the scene. And as if finding a human head wasn't disturbing enough, this head was in remarkably good condition. Not like it had been in the water or out in the elements, but like as if someone kept it on ice or in the refrigerator.
Oh, wow.
It just adds like a whole nother level of like fucked upness.
Yeah.
So while it would take a few days again for positive identification, it was pretty clear it was Angela. So at this point, the police have reached out to the FBI and everyone's like freaking out that we might have a serial killer.
Yeah, I'd be too.
It certainly didn't help that Silence of the Lambs had come out the year prior.
Oh, never thought of that.
Yeah, so everyone begins theorizing and rumors swirled. And of course, the media in this case sucked. They should be so ashamed of themselves. They just ran freaking wild and they were printing stories that weren't true. Like,
Of course they were.
this goes beyond, though. Like, some of the shit they wrote, one paper claimed that she had been skinned. Another claimed she had been disemboweled. Like, none of that shit happened, which is just so sick for the family to have to read that because some loser at whatever Arizona newspapers like wanted to get the story. Like, come on.
Not to get too far off topic here, but we're going to be covering a case in August that the family reached out to me because they saw a YouTube presentation that local boy slaughtered by monster. Like, and what happens in this case is so far from slaughtered that it's
right.
Whatever sells, whatever gets clicks, whatever gets views. That's the 90s version of begging for clicks and views.
It's true, but anyone who's listening, that those things did not happen. Like, what happened to Angela is awful enough. We don't need to make things up on top of it.
Right.
So they find her body, they find her head, and time marches on. They have nothing. So by May of 1993, her case was ice cold. And like, police had gone through hundreds of leads, but they were just no closer to finding their killer. They did talk to an FBI profiler, and he believed that the killer was probably about the same age as Angela, but I mean, I don't feel like that's super duper helpful. So, like I said, things are quiet for a little while until the morning of September 22nd, 1993. So this is, 10 months after she was found.
Give or take.
Yeah. So a woman and her sister, they're biking along the canal. It's one morning, and they each have like their toddlers with them in those little bike seats, like on the back of the bike. Yeah. And they were going to the playground. The one woman sees a large puddle coming up on the trail. She bikes right through it, and then she realizes that this was not a puddle of water, and her bike tires are now trailing some kind of like reddish brown liquid. And
Good
she's
Lord.
like, something is not right here. But like, they keep going. But she just couldn't get this out of her head. Even like as she and her sister are playing with their kids, they're like pushing their kids on the swings. And she's like, we gotta go back. Something is wrong here. So on the way back, she insisted that they stop. And soon enough, she discovered that her gut feeling was correct. This was not a huge puddle of water. It was blood.
Wow.
And then she realizes this blood trails to the edge of the canal. So she races home to call police, because again, we don't have cell phones. And the police arrive at the scene immediately, and they begin scouring the canal for like the source of the blood. Because they're like, okay, what happened? Where did this come from? Where is this going to lead to?
Yeah.
And soon enough, they find it. They're floating in the canal just about 100 yards from where Angela's head had been found. Was the body of 17-year-old Melanie Bernas.
Another body.
Uh-huh.
There is a raging lunatic on the loose, and they have every right. Police and everybody in that community has every right to be terrified.
Terrified. So identification would, of course, take a few days, but police kind of had an idea of who the body belonged to because they had received a missing persons report on Melanie the night before she was found.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about that in a second, but let's get some background on sweet Melanie. So Melanie Beth Bernas was born on September 14th, 1976, to parents Michael and Marlene Bernas. And she was the youngest of 5. She had 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. So she was like the baby of the family.
Yeah.
And at the time of her death, like her siblings had all moved out and her parents were separated. So it was Melanie living with her mom and their dog, and their dog's name was Hershey.
Oh, great name.
I know, I love that. So Melanie had just started her junior year of high school at Arcadia High. Fun fact, that's the same high school that Steven Spielberg went to.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So, but Melanie was a junior, and this adorable young woman, she was incredibly bright. Sources said she was taking several accelerated classes, and I swear, but then I couldn't find it, so don't quote me, but she was even taking a college course or two. So she was a very intelligent and driven young woman. She had spent that summer working in an ice cream shop at the local mall, which is so fun. I worked in an ice cream shop in high school.
Everybody did, I think.
I ate most of the ice cream.
Believe that.
So nothing has changed. So some of Melanie's friends were interviewed on the different shows, and they just talked about how, like, she loved to go swimming at her pool. She loved to jump on the trampoline. And they all said that, well, she could kind of be somewhat reserved and shy. It was like once she trusted you when you were in her circle, she was so fun and lively and goofy and just one of those people that people want to be around.
They're the best kind of people.
She seemed really great. So on Tuesday, September 21st, 1993, Melanie had actually stayed home from school that day because she hadn't been feeling super well. So it's about 7 p.m. She was already in her nighttime clothes that she usually wore to bed. So her mom, Marlene, who was on her way out to dinner, she just kind of assumed Melanie was going to be staying in that night. So before her mom left, Melanie had asked, how long are you going to be gone? And Marlene promised she'd be home in about 2 hours. And then she kissed Melanie, told her she loved her, and she went out to her dinner. When Marlene returned home later that night, it was about 9:30 p.m., the house was empty and Melanie's green mountain bike was missing. She was definitely an avid bike rider, but she knew she wasn't allowed to go riding at night, and her curfew was a very strict 9 p.m., and she did not break those rules. She had a great relationship with her parents, and she was not the type to skip curfew or be out too late or, any of those things. Marlene's first thought was maybe Melanie went to her dad's house. So she calls him, her ex-husband, to find out, and he's like, no, she's not here and I haven't seen her. So then Marlene starts calling friends of Melanie's. She's like, all right, maybe she lost track of time. Maybe she's somewhere and she needs a ride home. But the friends all had the same answer as Melanie's dad. She wasn't there. They hadn't seen her. So at this point, Marlene calls the police to file a missing persons report on her beautiful daughter. And we would find out later, according to Dateline, that Melanie did have plans that night to ride bikes with a friend. But then the friend got stuck late at work, so Melanie ended up going biking alone. So now we're back at the morning of the 22nd when the woman and her sister were riding their bikes. So when police get Melanie's body out of the canal, she's found wearing this weird teal turquoisey bodysuit. So not only did this bodysuit not belong to her, but it was for a child.
What?
This bodysuit was meant for a kid around 8 or 9 years old, not a 17-year-old.
This is one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard.
This is the weirdest case. Police believe that Melanie's killer dressed her in that bodysuit post-mortem. So that's just so weird.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole thing is strange, but the only way that makes sense is if it were put on after she was dead. Because otherwise, what?
It's just what in general. This whole case is what? She was also found with her shoes and socks on, and her clothing was found in 2 different spots. They found some of her clothing in a bush nearby, and then they also found some in a dumpster.
Oh, okay.
Similar to Angela, Melanie had been stabbed, pretty much in the same spot. But this time, the killer had carved a cross into her chest, kind of like he did with Angela, but apparently he had also carved letters into her body. And I don't know what the letters were. That was not released, or I couldn't find it at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I did read that it may have been initials.
Okay.
But I don't know whose initials. And unfortunately, this monster had also sexually assaulted the sweet girl. So police pretty much immediately have a bad feeling that this murder was connected to Angela's murder.
I think it should be more than a feeling. That's almost certainty. I mean, based on the similarities between the two crime scenes, it's almost a guarantee.
Right. Well, shortly after that, it's confirmed when the DNA from each crime scene's compared, and it was the same man that killed Angela and Melanie. They couldn't tell any particulars, but they could tell that it was the same person.
Right, apples to apples.
Yeah. So now police have to toe the line between like warning the public to a potential serial killer and not causing a mass panic.
Yeah, it's a tough.
How do you
tough.
do that? The whole
Tough to
city
navigate.
of Phoenix was terrified.
With good reason.
Even worse, this is where both cases would go cold until the year 2000. So we're jumping from 1993 to 2000, and all that happens then is the DNA results would be uploaded to CODIS, but nothing was found.
So in my career, when I've done cases that start in the 80s or 90s and then finish in the 2000s, if DNA solves a case, it never happens between like the year 2000 and the year like 2012. And then all of a sudden it just, all these new technologies come out, you know.
Well, and that's pretty much what happens. Like they're able to test in 2000, at least they get it uploaded into CODIS, but doesn't match anybody. So at this point, investigators think that the killer possibly moved or maybe even died. Because most killers don't just stop so abruptly, especially ones that did the things that he did.
Yes.
But that makes me think of BTK. He had so much time in between his like being active and not active. So I feel like that's, you can't necessarily go by that. The next major event in these cases, 2011.
It's a long time to wait for answers.
This is 20 years after the initial crimes happened. So in 2011, the cold case unit decides to revisit the Canal Killings as they had come to be known as. So the lead officer was a guy named Sergeant Troy Hillman. And when he and his team first took on the investigation, they had to start at the beginning. So they had to start going through all the case files that had been collected in the last 2 decades. So just like we talked about in Tara's case, stuff was not where it should have been. Things were out of order. Everything was disorganized. Notes got thrown in wherever. So they had to get everything organized. And by this point, 800 people had been spoken to, and many of them had given their blood samples. So they started reaching out to the people who hadn't given blood samples, and they would eventually end up traveling all over the country trying to catch up with these people. But all that really did was they were able to narrow it down to about 600 people, which is still an incredibly overwhelming amount of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So during this time, they reached out to the VDOC Society, and they're based in Philadelphia. They wanted help on the case. Are you familiar with the VDOC Society?
I am. It's basically volunteer forensic experts is the best way I can describe it.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk about them real quick because I think it's just such a cool organization.
It is.
So this VDOC Society, they started in 1990, and basically it's a group or a society of all volunteers who assist homicide and cold case investigations. And there are very specific qualifications that the case must meet for them to even consider taking it. And they definitely will not just insert themselves in investigations. They only take cases after being invited by the department handling the case. So yes. I couldn't just call them and be like, can you please reopen a case about my murdered aunt or niece or whoever? And everyone in this society, they're not just random Joe Schmoes off the street. According to their website, their members include criminologists, physicians, wildlife biologists, prosecutors, polygraph examiners, medical examiners, genetic DNA experts, anything and everything that you could think of are in this society.
Yeah, it's an all-star team. Let's gather all the great minds and call them when necessary. It's call in the cavalry.
So the VDOC Society was able to give the cold case team some really good input or intel or characteristics, whatever, on their suspect. And this information comes right from the Dateline episode. They said it was probably a male who still lived in the area and would have committed crimes earlier than the murders. He may have set fires or engaged in fantasy and make-believe. He was definitely a sexual sadist and was motivated by people's pain. And the biggest piece of information that they gave was this man is somewhere in your files.
Wow.
You have his name somewhere. So basically, it is someone on that list of 600 names.
Well, at least they narrowed it down.
Yeah, no problem. We got this. Well, you know who does got this? My girl, Colleen.
She has everything.
So this is where we summon up some girl power and celebrate Dr. Colleen M. Fitzpatrick. So in 2014, Colleen descends from her spot among the gods. And if you missed our episode on the heartbreaking murder of Sarah Yarborough back in the beginning of June, then you may not know much about my girl, Dr. Fitzpatrick. So to very quickly summarize her badassery. Her badassery. She holds a PhD in nuclear physics from Duke. She's worked for NASA and the Department of Defense. She's the co-founder of the DNA DOE project and ID identifiers. Oh, and she identified a toddler who died on the Titanic.
Is that all?
No big. So basically, she's a forensic goddess, and I want to be her friend. However, I realized we'd had nothing to talk about because she's a damn genius, and I spent my day playing hide and go seek with my dogs.
You'd be like, I got a free sandwich at Subway today.
She'd be like, cool.
Great.
Anyway, Dr. Fitzpatrick has now entered the chat, and while she is at some sort of conference, they're all at this DNA conference. She's there, and some of the investigators from this cold case unit are there. So she meets with the guys working the Canal Killings case, and she tells them, give me a chance, and I will narrow down that list of 600. And she's explaining how she and her team have designed software that can reference public DNA databases, and through genetic genealogy, she could help them out. Mm-hmm. And I think it's definitely safe to say that they were skeptical at first.
In 2014, yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely unsure about this witchcraft. But Colleen is like, what is the downside here? And they're like, all right, good point.
Well, you've tried everything else.
Exactly. And in their defense, part of the reason that this was so difficult, I know that Sergeant Hillman, this case became his baby. He was so passionate about it. So for him to have to give up this DNA and all this evidence and all of his work to an outsider, that's got to be a big pill to swallow.
Yeah, it's the egos things that we talk about. And it's not, when we say egos, it's some people, there are cops out there who are just me. I want this, the notoriety for solving this. But others, it's just a moral ego. It's like, I promised that I would solve this case and I want to do it. It's not so much about the notoriety. It's just about a personal gratification.
I mean, even if you think of at work, if you're working on a project and for some reason, you have to bring someone else on board or something like that, it hurts.
And especially if they complete the project or solve the case in this, you know what I mean? It's demoralizing. So,
they're nervous about it. I'd be uneasy as well. But thankfully, they give Dr. Fitzpatrick the benefit of the doubt. And God damn it, doesn't our girl come back with the surname of Miller?
Oh, man, that's such a common name, though.
Yeah.
Jones. Yeah.
Yeah. So during the renewed investigation, another detective had joined this group. His name is Detective Clark Schwarzkopf. He takes Dr. Fitzpatrick's information and he goes back to their list. And there are 6 Millers on the list.
Okay.
So we just narrowed down, Colleen, my girl, just narrowed it down from 600 people to 6.
That's a pretty good start.
And one of these people is basically screaming out to investigators. So remember that weird turquoise bodysuit thing Melanie was found in, even though it didn't belong to her?
The toddler jumpsuit?
Yes, child's jumpsuit, yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently shortly after her murder, some guy had called the police and he was like, I'm pretty sure that bodysuit, my roommate, it belongs to my roommate.
Why wouldn't they just investigate that at the time?
Well, here's the thing. It was never really followed up on because when they looked at the guy, they thought he was too young to have committed these crimes.
Okay, well, the biggest clue you have in this case is that somebody was wearing a weird jumpsuit that didn't fit, and then you got some other guy going, hey, I found a weird jumpsuit.
I know. My guess is maybe someone called it in, and whoever took the message maybe didn't realize what a big deal it was.
Yeah, and this isn't like some customer service thing where somebody called and they wanted a call back and you just forget to call. This is like, now this impacted how many lives?
Right. So that's not the only reason investigators like this name is like screaming out to them. This man also has a record for stabbing a woman in the back. So I'm guessing that Sergeant Hillman and Detective Schwarzkopf just about fell off their damn chairs.
Yeah.
All right, so who is this monster? If you were to close your eyes and picture an overweight incel with a neckbeard and a dopey-looking face, wearing a fedora, and there's a smell that he smells like a musty mix of BO and Doritos, and jerks off in his mom's basement while drinking Mountain Dew, and he says shit like, "M'lady," you get Bryan Patrick Miller.
Wow. Man, sounds like a real
king
peach.
of the incels.
Wow.
Police actually discover that he's like well known around Phoenix as the zombie hunter.
What?
Just
I mean, that tracks.
Get ready. And before I go any further, I do want to make it clear I am not making fun of cosplay. I think that cosplay is super awesome. I think it's wildly creative, and like I don't have the talent or the funds to actually be able to cosplay anything, but I think that people who do it, I think it's so freaking cool, and sometimes these costumes are amazing.
I saw 2 stormtroopers fighting with lightsabers in a park one time, and I was like entertained.
That's so cool.
They're called LARPers. You know what a LARPer? LARP, no. LARP? Live action role play.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I get it. My cousins do it, and they go to different places like dressed as things, and it's very cool. So
Comic-Con. You go to Comic-Con is a good time.
This is past the point of cosplay. This douchebag, he would wear this like spray painted trench coat and like a hard hat type helmet and this weird ass looking mask, almost like a mix of like a gas mask with the big black eyes and that thing on Bane's face. Bane from Batman.
It looks like a crab. It's like, I was born in the dark.
Then on top of all that, he would carry around like a fake souped up Gatling gun. And wait, it gets even worse. He would drive around like in an old police car. It was like a retired Crown Vic. Mm-hmm. And he had splashed all over it with fake blood. He had flashing green and yellow lights and the words zombie hunter all over it. Like, someone got a little overzealous with their cricket.
If you're going to be slaughtering women, I would probably drive something less conspicuous.
Oh, and I didn't even get to the worst part. He would have this grotesque zombie mannequin, like, in the back seat.
This guy's something.
He would wear this getup to, like, any sort of event where you could cosplay. Like, there was a Phoenix Comic-Con. He would go dressed as this. But past that, he would drive this car every day. Like, this was his regular car.
It was his daily. It was his Camry.
Yeah, like, if you're running to CVS to pick up, like, your prescription, he's driving that. Like, and he had all these pictures of himself in his zombie hunter getup, posing with, like, police officers.
Oh, he was taunting them then.
Like, I'm right here, but you don't know it. So, Bryan Patrick Miller was born in 1972. His father passed away when he was young. I think he was about 5 years old. His father passed away in a motorcycle accident. So, he was raised by his mother, Ellen. Ellen was awful. However, I would like to take a moment and pay respect to her incredible lady mullet, because that thing is impressive.
It's like, this turned into the Mullet Unscripted podcast.
I know. Can we just change it? Ellen was a detention officer at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and Ellen was a mean, abusive bitch who made it clear to everyone that her child was unwanted. She was not a mother. She was an abuser. Like, there's no way around that. She was a horrible, horrible human being. And She was known to beat Bryan and deprive him for punishment.
Wow.
Miller would later blame his actions on his mother and the abuse she inflicted on him, but plenty of people have horrific childhoods and they don't murder people.
Yeah, and I don't want to give this guy any credit whatsoever, but I think if there's one big thing that comes out of this entire podcast, like we have covered so many people that their parents have been just like this, and look at what they've gone on to do. So if people learn nothing else from us, be a good parent.
Seriously. So Miller would try to say that the women he hurt reminded him of his mother, which I'm like, really? The 17-year-old you raped and murdered, she reminded you of your mother?
It's excuses. It's excuses.
100%. So let's keep the nature versus nurture debate in the back of our heads for now. But Bryan Miller, regardless of his mother or anything, he was a monster from early on. And his actions as a child and young adult are extremely disturbing. Before the age of 15, he was called for arson of an occupied building. I read that it was when he was 12 and he set fire in his school.
So the profile was right. The FBI profile about starting fires.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Crazy.
And engaged in make-believe, that whole zombie hunter shit. Like, So I don't know exactly what else happened. Like, his juvenile records were unsealed for court, but I cannot find them. But I do know that he ended up in a home for troubled youth, and he was awful and destructive there as well. And then in May of 1989, he's 16 years old at this point, and one day he's riding the bus. And he gets off at a stop along with a woman who was like a few steps ahead of him. Out of nowhere, Miller pulls out a knife, runs up to this random woman, and stabs her in the back.
What? I just don't get it.
Right. And this woman, Celeste Bentley, she first thought that Miller had punched her, and she literally yells, "What the hell did you do that for?"
Yeah, I've never been stabbed, but I've heard that's what it feels like.
But then she reached around her back and realized she was bleeding profusely and that she hadn't been punched, but she had been stabbed.
Scary.
So the police are called, Miller's caught, and Celeste was actually able to ID her attacker. Like, they caught him pretty much right there, and they were like, "Is this the dude?" And she's like, "Yup."
Wow.
So Miller was charged with aggravated assault, and he was sent to Adobe Mountain Juvenile Correctional Facility until he turned 18. And I want to make this very clear, this woman is so lucky to be alive. Had this dipshit angled the knife just a little bit differently, I think it was he held the knife vertically. Had he held it horizontally, she'd be dead. She would have suffered serious organ damage and most likely would have died.
Yeah, and if it's in the back, one nick of that spine and you're done.
Mm-hmm. It ended up going into her rib cage. Oh, and by the way, this sicko got off on this. He told police that stabbing Celeste sent chills up his spine.
Of course it did. Because that's the next, you're elevating these fantasies, the role playing in his mind that he's been doing all these years. And now it's going up a level and it's intoxicating.
This guy is so messed up. He is probably one of the worst people I've ever covered.
Yeah, this is a bad one.
So while he was in juvie, his mom found a note that he had written. It was like a to-do list of sorts. It was labeled The Plan, and then step by step, I think it was 24 steps. It talked about how Miller wanted to kidnap a woman, rape her, kill her, and dismember her. And it went into very specific detail. And Ellen was rightfully horrified, and she turned the note over to police. Then she refused to let Miller live with her when he was released from juvie in 1990, which was a couple months after she found the note. So she's like, "You are not coming home."
Right.
So then he was sent to a halfway house where he lived for a few years. And remember this for later, because there's another case that he's linked to. And that murder occurred when he was living in this halfway house.
I do not doubt that one bit.
Oh, yeah. We'll get there at the end. So, in 1997, he married a woman named Amy. And where did they move? Washington State, because of course,
Of course they did. Because why not?
I'm a murderer. Where should I go?
How about Washington?
Yeah. FYI, they were divorced by like 2005, so it was not a
Shocker.
happy marriage.
Jeez.
And Miller would admit to police that he absolutely hated his ex-wife. Like, past the point of normal, like, we're divorced, we hate each other, like, hated with like a fiery passion.
Wow.
And Amy would later testify about what like an abusive and sadistic monster Miller was, which we will come back to.
Even though they got divorced, I mean, 7 years with this guy is still a really long. Think about how long 7 years is with somebody like this.
Oh,
Holy cow.
Yeah. Well, he was in jail for a little bit of that time, so hold tight.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait. And I haven't even mentioned, Amy and Miller had a child together.
Oh, great.
He's living in Washington, pretending to be this law-abiding family man. But of course, he couldn't keep his urges under control for very long. So this next attack that I'm going to talk about, it wouldn't come out until 2015,
Okay.
but it happened in 2000. So a 14-year-old girl was out hiking a trail in Everett, Washington, when she was viciously stabbed. And the attack was reported to police, but they never found the guy who did it. Like, they were just focused on like local transients and people around the area. And Bryan Miller was never even like a blip on their radar.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he does eventually get arrested for the murders of Angela and Melanie, this woman comes forward and she's like, that was the guy.
Right.
But by that point, the statute of limitations had run out. So like he could never be charged for that.
Exactly.
So he got away with that attack. But in 2002-ish, he was arrested for, surprise, surprise, stabbing a woman. So the details of this kind of differ among sources, but from what I gather is he was out driving around and he saw like a woman he sort of knew. It was like a friend of a friend. Her name was Melissa. And he was like, oh, hey, like, do you need a ride? And she, recognized him and she's like, yeah, that'd be great. So once she's in his car, she's like, I really need to make a phone call. And so he's like, oh, no problem. We're right near my work. I don't know where he was working at the time, but they ended up driving to his work and he like let her in so she could make the phone call. So they get there. She's dialing the phone, whatever. Out of nowhere, Miller runs at her and stabs her in the back.
This guy loves stabbing people in the back. Can't even show your face to him. That's
He's
the
such
ultimate
a little
cowardice.
Bitch. They fight for this weapon and she's somehow able to get free and like gets police. And this poor woman ended up needing 30 stitches to close up the wounds he inflicted.
Crazy.
But he told police that she tried to rob him and he was just defending himself.
Yeah, okay. All right, dude. All right,
Yeah,
zombie
well,
hunter.
the sick part, when it came down to it in court, it was a he said, she said, and he was acquitted.
You got to be kidding me. God.
This is coming from like kind of what I gathered. This is my speculation, opinion, whatever. I think that she had some personal troubles and demons going on. And I think that when you compared the two of them, she probably looked like, oh, we believe this family man over this woman.
You see it all the time, though. Think about all the perpetrators that look like their mugshots that we see, and then they show up in court looking like an accountant or
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's all about public perception. Like, you put two people on a stand. One of them is the receptionist at an old folks home, and the other one is a drug-addicted prostitute. Whose word are you going to take before you even hear a word out of their mouth? And I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it happens.
Right. And I think that that's what happened here, because you cannot tell me that a wound that required 30 stitches, that's self-defense. Get out of here. However, while he was awaiting trial, he had been held in prison for like 5 to 6 months. And his ex-wife, Amy, she would say that this is when things got really bad. He would start writing her these foul letters about like all the sadistic sexual shit he wanted to do to her. And then after he was acquitted and returned home, he carried out these sadistic fantasies, like even holding a knife to Amy's throat during sex and engaging in needle play.
Oh, wow. That's horrifying.
Like, yikes.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, they were divorced by 2005.
That even crosses a line that you have.
We're not kink shaming here.
When Melissa's offended, holy shit.
Consent, people. So this whole time, Miller is just out there, like living his life, raising his daughter. And
Yes.
detectives are working this case, like trying to find this guy. So this brings us back to 2014 when Colleen gave detectives the surname of Miller. So once they dig out the 6 Millers and they get to his file, they're pretty certain that this is their guy. However, like we talked about in Tara's episode, gut instincts are not evidence, whether or not they should be.
Yeah.
So they decide to start surveilling Bryan Patrick Miller, partly to learn a little bit more about him and partly in hopes that he would like throw something out so they could get his DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So by this time in 2014, this nasty edge bridge troll, he's 42 years old. He's working in an Amazon warehouse and raising his daughter because for some reason, this monster had full custody.
So he was good. He was savvy too.
Yes, it's terrifying. And there are differing reports on how he treated her, which we'll kind of get to, but I don't want to speculate. Like, I feel like this girl has enough to
leave her
deal
out
with.
of it. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So after some time following Miller, he really hadn't done anything to give detectives the opportunity to collect his DNA. So now they're like, all right, we got to get creative. So every day on his break, he would go hang out in his loser mobile, his zombie hunter car, in the parking lot. And in one of the shows, the Detective Clark Schwarzkopf guy is like, he would sit in his car on his break, and he would blare this awful music, this god-awful music. Like,
He would
was
like
most
yell,
disgusted
"Oh my God,"
by whatever
fired up.
music genre Miller was listening to.
I refuse to recognize Pantera as a band.
He was like so mad about it. So clearly he wasn't listening to boy bands because killers don't listen to boy bands.
Yeah, a little vitamin C.
You don't even know who that is. So anyway, at this point, it's New Year's Eve of 2014, and Miller the Monster, what I'm choose to call him, is on his break when a man approaches him. Now, we know this man is Detective Schwarzkopf, but he uses a different name when he introduces himself to Miller, and he tells Miller that he's a security consultant. And he's been investigating some recent thefts at the warehouse, and he asks Miller, do you want to be on my team and provide a little bit of surveillance? He's like, you're always out here on your break, you could be looking around for me, and of course we'll pay you.
It's pretty slick.
So of course, anything for attention or just like the easiest, weensiest bit of power, Miller jumps at it.
Mm-hmm.
So Detective Clark Schwarzkopf, I'm just going to call him Detective Clark. He's like, cool, meet me at Chili's in a few days and you can fill out an application and I'll give you like the information we have so far.
They have good fajitas. That's just my opinion.
I don't remember the last time is there even any Chili's near us?
Yeah.
Moving on. So 2 days later, it's January 2nd, 2015, Miller arrives at the local Chili's restaurant to meet with Detective Clark. But when Miller gets out of his zombie hunting loser mobile, his 15-year-old daughter's with him.
Oh, wow.
So this kind of throws everyone off their game. And keep in mind, the Chili's restaurant was filled with law enforcement. They were all just like sitting there acting like normal diners, enjoying their awesome blossoms. So they're like, shit, he's got his daughter. Like, what do we do? So they decide to move forward with the plan. So they get a table, they order food, and they're just kind of engaging in small talk. And now the whole reason for this undercover sting was to get Miller's DNA.
Mm-hmm. Get a soda.
Because nothing can be easy. Miller barely touches his drinking glass and doesn't use his silverware.
He probably knows.
Well, so he had ordered water and a burger, and even while eating his burger, like he still wasn't really touching his drink.
No fat guy wants water.
Oh, right. And Detective Clark is like, you sure you don't want something else to drink? Maybe like an ice cold Coca-Cola Classic?
Like a big gulp?
Chili's margarita? Come on, man. You look thirsty.
Wow.
And Miller's like, no, I'm good. And in the show, Detective Clark gets so upset. He's like, he just kept eating his burger, which he inhaled in 5 bites. I'm like, all right, bro, I get it, but maybe that's not what we're worried about.
I think we're focusing on the wrong thing, detective.
Exactly. Between that and the music, I'm like, sir, focus.
Yeah, this guy's just a
here.
crotchety old detective.
I was cracking up.
And you were on someone's lawn.
So get off my lawn. So finally, Miller takes a few small sips of his water. And I'm sure like everyone in the restaurant is like holding their breath at this point. Like,
Yeah.
imagine being the server, because the restaurant management, like they obviously knew what was going on because they had to be really careful that they didn't contaminate anything that could have his DNA.
Exactly.
So now lunch is over and Miller and his daughter leave, and the plastic Chili's mug is bagged up for evidence and sent straight to the lab for DNA testing.
Excellent.
So meanwhile, Detective Clark and Hillman, they're like so hopeful that this is the guy. But Detective Clark is having serious second thoughts because after having lunch with Miller and his daughter and seeing the two of them interact, he's like really struggling to believe that this man could stomach the murders that had been committed. And I'm only bringing this up because this is why I said I saw conflicting reports about the relationship he had with his daughter. Because I saw in some sources that he could potentially be abusive, but then to hear from Detective Clark, you kind of get a different perspective. So I don't know what that was like. I find it hard to believe that he was like Mike Brady or Ward Cleaver, but who knows?
But they put on a show and they can pretend to be good dads.
Yeah.
Like these people are different people in the dark than they are in the light.
100%. And this guy is a freaking monster. So now if this were Law and Order, we'd have the DNA results back after a quick commercial break. But because it takes a little bit longer in real life, so 11 days after the Chili sting, the head of the lab pays a special visit to Detective Clark Schwarzkopf. Bryan Patrick Miller was the Canal Killer.
That's a huge moment because getting a monster like that off the streets, that's like when cops are trying to catch people speeding. They want the big fish. They want the Ferrari doing 110 miles an hour. They don't want the...
Exactly. So on January 13th, 2015, they arrest Miller. And between his defense team pulling a whole bunch of shit and then COVID, his trial wouldn't end up starting until October of 2022.
Oh my God, so fairly recently.
That's wild.
That is wild.
So we'll get there. But they arrest him and he denies everything. And they're like, dude, like we have your DNA. And he responds, he's super calm and collected. And he's like, well, I don't see how that's possible.
He didn't know about this thing.
Exactly. So while they're interrogating him, they also get a search warrant to search the home he was renting that he and his teenage daughter were living in. Ew. EWWWW. Ew. What the hell is with killers being disgusting hoarders?
We're a different breed of people.
But it's like, this house was foul. They ended up taking over 6,000 items into evidence.
Wow. And then it's figuring out what is evidence and what's just junk.
It's some of the evidence that they collected. They had a hacksaw. They had a sword. They found teeth, which I'm kind of like, well, parents keep their kids' teeth, which is weird enough.
Yeah, we have several cups of teeth here.
Exactly. So they find teeth, hacksaw, sword, like so much. Oh, and they also find credit cards and like driver's licenses of
all the women. Yep. Wow.
Yeah. And like apparently like they checked into most of them, but there were some that they like could not find. So like we still don't know like where he got them or what became of those.
Sure.
women.
Wow.
Oh, and of course they found plenty of brutally violent pictures of women being beaten, stabbed, decapitated, you name it.
Pictures are a way to relive those fantasies. When I can't be out committing murder, at least I can think about the ones I did already do.
And like think about this though. All of this shit is in the house where his daughter lived.
They don't care.
Disgusting. I know. So, as I mentioned, it would take until October 2022 to get this trial moving. And the defense team really wanted to use the insanity defense. So, like, they needed Miller to be evaluated and reevaluated and blah, blah, blah. And I know we're running long, so I'm going to quickly cover some of the trial. So, finally, on October 3rd, 2022, the trial commences. And Miller had chosen to go for a bench trial, which means there's no jury. So the ultimate decision of guilty or not guilty would be made by one judge. And the defense's argument was basically like, yeah, he did kill Angela and Melanie, but it wasn't his fault. His mommy was like really mean, so we should feel really bad for him, even though he murdered and mutilated at least 2 innocent women. And I do want to point out that like his mother Ellen died in 2010, so I'm not saying like she was Satan, but it's also very convenient to blame shit on someone who isn't here.
Can't defend themselves.
Right. So just putting that out there. So the defense claimed that due to the trauma inflicted by Mommy Dearest, Miller had developed mental health problems. They diagnosed him with a condition called dissociative amnesia, which meant he had no recollection of the crimes. He couldn't remember a damn thing. So the prosecutor's like, he doesn't remember the crimes he committed? And the defense is like, no, dude, we told you, he can't remember anything. So the prosecutor's like, really? Then why did he remember and admit to stabbing Celeste Bentley? And why did he remember and admit to stabbing Melissa? Even though he claimed it was self-defense, he still admitted to stabbing her. So that's interesting that he can remember 2 of the stabbings, but not all 4.
Well, that was the scientific diagnosis. The real diagnosis is selective memory.
And this isn't an exact quote, but I assume the defense attorney is like, well, shit. So the trial ends up lasting 6 months, and the defense just kept drove home the abuse narrative so hard. It was clear they were trying to make him the victim, not the innocent women he murdered. But thankfully, Judge Suzanne Cohen, who's another badass woman, she did not buy into this Mommy Dearest defense and delivered the following judgment. Miller was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 2 counts of attempted sexual assault. And he is later sentenced to... Yes.
Oh, I was going to say OWAP.
No.
If anyone deserves the death penalty, you're looking at the prime candidate here. And if you don't believe it by all the stories you're hearing just from us, this is just 50-some episodes of ours. Listen to all the podcasts. There are people that do not belong on this earth.
And he's one of them. So before I end, I just want to tell you about that other murder that they're pretty sure he committed, but they just don't have the evidence that I mentioned while he was living in the halfway house. So on May 26, 1992, 13-year-old Brandy Myers was going door to door for a school fundraiser. And she was last seen only 70 feet from that halfway house that he was living in at the time. And his halfway house was almost in between Brandy's home and her school. So he would have most likely would have seen her walking to and from school every day.
You were talking about Silence of the Lambs earlier when it came out. There was a line in there from Hannibal Lecter. He was trying to help Clarice solve the mystery of Buffalo Bill. And he said something, he says, we covet what we see. That was a hint that he gave. And that's exactly what is happening here.
He would later admit to Amy that he had killed a mentally challenged Girl Scout while living in that home. He said that she came to his door selling something. So Brandy wasn't a Girl Scout, but she did go to his home, for some kind of fundraiser thing. And we know that she was a little bit developmentally delayed. She was, I think one source said she functioned at more of the level of a 9 or 10-year-old.
Okay.
So then Bryan would go on to tell Amy that he quickly grabbed he didn't say her name. He grabbed this little girl, pulled her inside, where he proceeded to stab her and dismember her poor little body in his bathtub.
It's so
sad.
sad.
Then he threw her remains in the garbage can.
Oh, that's on par.
When the neighbors complained of the odor emitting from the trash can, he claimed that it was rotting meat.
He's not lying.
Oh, well then the trash was eventually collected and hauled away. And again, he was never been charged with anything in relation to her. I want to make that clear. But as of this recording, her remains have never been found.
That's so terrible and just so sick.
So cute.
This guy treats the victims like they're not real people. They're possessions.
Mhm. Well, he is a horrific. I don't even want to call him a human. He shouldn't be in that category. But that is the case of the Phoenix, Arizona Canal Killings by the disgusting maggot, Bryan Patrick Miller. But more importantly, it's about Angela Brosso and Melanie Bernas and Brandy Myers for what they went through. And they were such incredible young women. And well, Brandy and Melanie were under 18, so they were girls, but
Yeah.
they were these incredible girls and women who didn't get a chance because of this douchebag.
This was hands down one of the most brutal cases I've ever heard of, and just one of the most senseless and repulsive. And I don't have enough adjectives to describe the way he treated a human being, several human beings.
Yeah. And really, we're supposed to believe he just stopped after Melanie?
There's more victims, and they'll eventually tie it, because the better this technology gets, the better the tracking gets, the better the databases get. They will find more victims, and they will keep your eyes peeled, folks, on the news for the next decade, and keep this guy's name in the back of your mind, because you will see his name attached to a case again. I can guarantee it.
Yep.
That was a crazy story, and I think it's awesome that Colleen again saves the day. That's two cases in like 4 or 5 weeks where she swoops in like a superhero and does what she does.
I'm going to make her a cape.
Don't do that.
Superwoman cape.
This is why she's going to think you're an idiot.
I don't know that the case would have ever been solved without Colleen.
Couldn't agree
to
more.
narrow it down from 600 to 6 is a huge deal. And this monster could still be walking around living his life if it weren't for her. And the hard work from everyone else who worked on this case.
Do not forget them. And honestly, I don't even know what's going on next week, because I've been so focused on our guest and that portion of the month that I'm just along for the ride the first couple weeks.
Don't you worry. I have everything under control. I am presenting another case next week about, I don't want to give too much away, but we have a badass woman who fought for justice.
That's good enough tease. I like it.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a really good one. So stay tuned for that. But also, tell us what you think. You can hit us up on our socials, Facebook, Insta, TikTok, Blue Sky, at Murder Unscripted. And you can also email us at murderunscriptedpod@gmail.com, or you can send us a note through our website, www.murderunscriptedpod.com. And if you didn't totally hate us and you want to click 5 stars, we'd be very appreciative. Like, subscribe, all the things. Well, on that note, we will see everyone next week. And until then, be safe, be kind, and remember, perverts don't wear signs that say they're perverts.
No, but they apparently wear spray-painted trench coats and drive zombie hunter cars.
Yeah, he needs to put his cricket away. No more cricketing for you, sir.
Or you, no capes.
No, damn it. Bye.